did you and Terry first meet? Do you recall the first time you met Terrence Malick?
Yeah, we met, I was partners with a filmmaker named Paul Williams. Paul and I had produced 3 films that Paul directed. And then Paul kind of went on a spiritual journey, but he had introduced me. He left the film business for a while.
Right.
And but I'd gotten to know Terry through Paul.
Did he ever finish AFI?
Well, he was a student there. It was like one of the first classes, if not the first class. Was
David Lynch there at the time, or was Lynch a little after that?
A little later.
A little later.
But he was I think Arthur Penn was his mentor at AFI. And Arthur lent his name when we were trying to raise financing, because he had done, you know, some great movies and was well known. And in the end, we never needed it. But in the beginning, he lent his credibility to the project.
What do you reflect as a student filmmaker? Terry's a student filmmaker.
I think I was impressed and connected with Terry intellectually, and sort of committed to work together.
Right.
And then I saw a short he had made, which wasn't that great.
Right.
But my instincts were good.
And you were a philosophy major at Stanford, correct? And Terry studied philosophy at Harvard.
Yeah.
How much philosophizing, I mean, when you say there was a connection there, was it built into a philosophical view of life or study?
I think it's a matter of behavior. I don't think we talked about Heidegger that much.
How much of it was a risk at the time, taking on this project with Terry?
It was a real risk. In fact, the film only cost about $300,000, but it was all, personal money that we were raising from family and friends, and particularly my mother. My father had died. My mother was running a family toy company, and she was helping finance the movie.
Yeah.
And we had a production manager who didn't think Terry knew what he was doing.
Really?
And in the end, there was a fierce argument, and he left. Went back to New York, told my mother to save her money, don't put another dime in it. And she stood by me.
That's a good mom.
Yeah. So it was a very difficult film, because the independent film wasn't well established then at all. There were very few. The studios controlled the financing and distribution of movies. There was no Miramax. There was no New Line. There was no independent source of financing the way there is now.
How practical is Terrence Malick as a filmmaker, would you say?
He takes his time.
Do you have a philosophy in terms of what does the producer do?
My alliances was the filmmaker, and it was like us against the world.
Did you ever pull Terry aside and say, look, let's look at this architecturally, where can we make it work better? Or was it Terry kind of doing the growing pains and learning, and you kind of supporting him on that level?
It was more like that.
Yeah, yeah.
I think, no, we were like just scrounging for money and trying to keep it together.
What was your assessment of the working methods at the time? Did they look different to you, or were you sort of learning with Terry about Terry? How much stomach churning was going on for you, and how unorthodox was it at the time, considering now what we think of Malick's work methods per se?
It was very stomach churning. There was a lot of tension and dissension, and it was not an easy shoot. It was one technician almost burned to death in the fire scene.
The fire,
it was a terrible accident. And I remember Terry's wife at the time, we had our office in a trailer, and she had this huge dog the size of a horse.
It's not the dog in the first shot, is it?
Yeah. So that dog was in that trailer all the time.
That's a horse, yes.
And it was not a good thing. A lot of people didn't like it, but Terry's wife was, it's her dog.
Right, so it stays.
It stays.
Yeah. The producing of Badlands and the development of the script, when Terry came to you, did he have a fully realized script? I mean, I've always wondered what a Terrence Malick script looks like, and it probably looks different over the years.
No, it's very opaque.
It's very opaque, yes. I guess the one dramaturgical question I harbor is voiceover.
Terry had that.
Would you say all of Sissy's, how much of Sissy's final voiceover is in the script?
No, that's one of the things that was there.
Right.
The idea that voiceover is sometimes put on to help save a movie, in this case, is not how it worked. It was very much part of the fabric of the film.
What about the Marty and Sissy and Terry?
That was a bond that was, and Jack Fisk.
And Jack, right.
That bond was there almost from the start.
And it seems like history has solidified that bond. Yeah. Was there ever any discussion about Terry? Maybe you could go out there and talk about the film. You didn't want that, or it was just
never occurred.
Never occurred. Is this different than his other films? I mean, that's kind of a firm grasp of the obvious, but to what extent, to what level would you say?
I was talking to someone about that recently. I think I didn't have a good answer. He was saying that his later films have a kind of a state of grace, which is not a preoccupation of just Badlands or Days of Heaven.
When Terry, after Days of Heaven, went to Europe, did you ever think he wouldn't come back?
Maybe.
What do you think brought him back?
I don't know. I'm not sure.